Hi there, Angela.Naeth here from Angela.Naeth.Coaching, talking to you about Echo one-on-one periodization, the whys and the whats and the hows of how we coach through Echo one-on-one. So what we're going to look at is how we coach an individual through different block types and how an athlete would get into that block type, how it's built, understanding the role of physiological testing in this decision framework, and then creating physiological and practical block decisions based on your actual data and information we receive as coaches. So why do we do this? So when we think of block periodization, we think of a way of training for a certain amount of weeks, and this allows us to give the athlete exactly what they need when they need it. So it's based on not only practical thought process, but physiological thought process in regards to where you are as the athlete. So sometimes we have very focused blocks where you get really deep adaptations, and then sometimes we look at very specific blocks for either the run, the bike, or the swim, and it matches the science with the athlete's needs. It creates a greater efficiency and training adaptation. So the three different block types that we have, so there's a few. So you got to think of your body as a house, basically. So the bottom is your base and your durability. Above that becomes your build and threshold. At the very, very top that creates the ceiling of the house or the roof of the house is your VO2 max. The other ones that are in between all this is your build threshold. That's a little bit longer than the normal build threshold, so it's right up at that critical power. A very specific block, which could be actually race-specific paces and powers. And then there's the hybrid type, where we're looking at all the different types of physiologies and the needs of that athlete in determining like a little bit of specificity, build threshold that's a little bit longer, and then the VO2 max. So we're going to go a little bit deeper into each one of these where you may see your coaching and your weeks be created by each of these blocks. So the purpose of the base and durability block is to build that really strong foundation. It develops fatigue resistance and movement economy, and it enhances your mitochondria, which is like your energy cells, and it creates a more steady state, low tempo, high tension training stress. So if you can think of it, it's really low intensity, ZR, Z1, for a majority of the percentage of the training stress that you will do with really long duration, and that becomes progressive. So where this kind of lies in this system of critical power and critical pace and how we use it is between ZR and Z2. So as you can see, it's a pretty long stretched rectangle in regards to where those power zones and pace zones and where your training will be. So the next block is your build threshold block. So this raises your ceiling a little bit. So what this means is everyone has a critical power or critical pace where we become unstable. So we want to be able to build you up a little bit so that that is just below or above your threshold, and it increases that CP-VO2 ratio. So basically your critical power or your critical speed over your VO2. Now this in general improves your fatigue resistance, and a lot of the times you can see workouts in your program called Sweet Spot, Critical Power Plus, and the intensity is more moderate and the duration is not as long for some of these. Now again, we don't lose the fact that we're going to do a lot of endurance and aerobic efficiency work, but a more percentage of your training stress will go into this build threshold. So where does this lie? It lies in between zone 2 and zone 3, like the beginning of zone 3, and just above that critical power, critical speed zone. So as you can see, these blocks in here show where that lies and the percentages based on that. So you do a lot more in that kind of in between zone 2 and zone 3 and a little bit above your threshold zone. The next block is the VO2 max block. So this is for someone who needs to expand their aerobic capacity. So this is for someone who has a really big base already, and for us to increase the ceiling of that critical power, we need to increase the amount of VO2 work you do. So for someone who is really efficiently aerobically, we need to increase that the capacity that you have. And so we would want to incorporate more short, high intensity intervals. So these type of workouts are really, really high intensity. So think like 1, 2, 3 minutes and lower duration. So again, more of our percentages of training stress will be above the critical power and critical speed point. All right, the next one is a little bit kind of what we spoke of before, where it's the build threshold long. So this is where we want to increase your time to exhaustion. If you've seen one of our earlier videos, critical power and critical speed is anywhere from 40 to 60 minutes of something that you can hold and sustain for that period of time. So let's say as a cyclist, you can ride 250 watts for 43 minutes and then you're just done. Our goal of this build threshold work is to increase that time to exhaustion at that point in time. So this is just below that threshold is where we can get that expansion. It improves your fatigue resistance, and a lot of these workouts are called sweet spot. And again, it's a more moderate intensity and duration. So here it lies at the very top of zone 2, the starting of zone 3. So we're really expanding that part of your house. The specificity block is for that race-specific execution. Now, depending upon your race type, it could be super long, it could be super short. So we really look at what the athlete needs in regards to their specificity of their race. So we want the athlete to develop a rate of perceived effort at their race pace, and then use that to sustain that intensity under stress of position. So if you are a triathlete, getting into your TT bars for an extended period of time at race pace effort, and that is the source of where you get your training stress. So this, again, can be a long range because dependent upon what your race specifies. So if you are an Ironman athlete, it'll probably be that more top of zone 1. If you're a 70.3 athlete or getting ready for a 70.3, it's in zone 2, Olympic zone 3, and so on and so forth for a runner in speed sets. So the hybrid block is another block that you could be put into where we expand kind of everything. So you have a really good base and you're a pretty balanced athlete, and so we want to get in some intensity at your race intensity. We want to maintain what you have already because you're quite balanced in the sense that you have this anaerobic capacity. So it's kind of a mixed bag of all so that we don't lose what we've gained and also increase where you are. So this, again, is a huge gamut of where you can be. We mix it up with a little bit of everything, and that way this can be used during race season, it can be used off season. It just depends where your physiology lies. And then we have our last block, which is kind of like that rebuild, reset. So we just absorb everything we can, and it restores your training freshness, your physical and mental reset. And so we don't really even think about where you are in terms of your ratios and physiology. So this could be after a race, or maybe as an athlete coach, we decide that you just need a little bit of a detraining mode to kind of reset things. So here's just an example of where the duration intensities lie. So the duration's in blue, the intensity is in red, and you can see how it fluctuates within the context of what we're trying to achieve. Here's an example of a workload. This athlete is in build threshold for the bike and build durability block in the run. So these are two different blocks that we're using for this athlete because their physiology showed us they needed to build a threshold, that they needed to increase their threshold ability on the bike, but still get a very long base and durability on the run. And that's basically the blocks. And so what we do with those blocks, looking at your critical power, your critical speed, your ratios, depending where you are as an anaerobic or aerobic or specific to your race, we use these blocks for roughly 6 to 8 weeks. We retest you, and this is very specific to Echo one-on-one coaching. If you have any further questions or want to learn more about it, just connect with me via email or the website, and hope to hear from you. Thank you.